Hello, everyone. How's it going? Welcome to our wellness chat. I'm going to open up or share my screen one moment here with our presentation. Okay. Can everyone see that okay? Just click this. There we are. All right. Okay. And there we are. And we'll get started. So today we are talking about improving your nutrition. We're going to go just kind of a deep dive into nutrition and the different components and how you can have a healthy diet. All right. And part of the reason why we're talking about this is that March is National Nutrition Month. Um, Now, this is technically headed by the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, which a lot of registered nutritionists and dietitians are affiliated with. They create this website, eatright.org, which has a lot of really good information. And if you also want to learn more information about nutrition and like this topic, Eat Right is great, but also myplate.gov is a really good website to get some general information. And pretty easy to remember, eatright.org and myplate.gov, both food related. Um, but that's why part of the reason why we're talking about this today. So we are focused on nutrition for Americans, and the general guidelines have been created for the 2020 to 2025 series. Are right here. So these are the four. It's follow a healthy dietary pattern for every life stage. And so depending on, whether you're a newborn baby or, a child or an adult, there's going to be different nutritional guidelines that you need to follow and needs. The second guideline is to customize and enjoy nutrient-dense food and beverage choices to reflect your personal preferences, cultural traditions, and budgetary considerations. So the main thing here is nutrient-dense food. And that's something we're going to talk a little bit more about. But, every culture has nutrient-dense food. And it's just about being mindful about what it is and being mindful of what isn't nutrient-dense. And also, you can get this same kind of food on a cheap budget. You don't need to be breaking the bank to get healthy food. The third guideline is to focus on meeting food group needs with nutrient dense food and beverages and stay within calorie limits. So we're going to talk about food groups in a little bit and a little bit on calories. Finally, the fourth guideline is to limit food and beverages higher in added sugars, saturated fat, and sodium, and to limit alcoholic beverages. So we'll talk about these points a little bit more in a bit. So first, just to kind of touch on nutrient-dense food. So these are foods that um, have no added sugars or excessive saturated fat or sodium. Typically, you focus on whole grains and fresh vegetables and fruits. Just a balanced diet, but without these added things. So some examples like cereal, having a non-sweetened cereal is going to be more of a nutrient-dense food. If you have added sugar, the more sugar you add on, the less nutritious it is for you because it leads to other negative health effects. Same with yogurt. If there's too much, full fat yogurt often has a lot of saturated fat. So low fat would be better. And also you want to be mindful of things, with added sugar like yogurt. Often you just want to use fresh fruit to add sugar instead of having sugar already added to it. Sodium, low sodium foods are really important. Ideally, you don't want to be salting your food because most foods already have sodium in them of some type. And so, so we'll kind of talk a little more about that. But sodium is one of these things that's really important to manage to keep our blood vessels and heart healthy and blood pressure healthy. looking at oils, ideally, something like butter has a lot of saturated fat. So using a vegetable oil or olive oil is going to be better, has more healthy fats. And then for beverages, like soda, ideally you want to minimize something like soda because soda is pretty much all added sugar. Um, Instead, opt for water, or if you like the carbonation, maybe a carbonated water. Um, Aim for natural fruit uh, juices as well. Uh, but just always be mindful of any add-ons. So any added sugar, salt, um, anything with excessive fat, or particularly saturated fat. Oops, one moment here. Okay. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the food groups. So I'm sure we all know these. On the right, you can see the healthy plate logo, and you can see that a majority of your plate ideally should be vegetables, and we'll talk more on that. So actually, half the plate is fruits and vegetables. The other half is your grains and proteins, and then you can leave a little for some dairy as well. So we'll talk about these, but ideally when you're eating, you really want to emphasize, really load your plate with veggies and fruit and have less of the grains, noodles, and meats. Right. So going into each of these little food groups, first, vegetables. Really important is to vary your vegetables. So vegetables come in kind of all shapes and colors. Um, and you want to have a rainbow of vegetables, ideally every day. There's dark green vegetables like spinach and broccoli. You got red and orange, like your peppers and carrots. Um, Beans, peas, and lentils are also in this group. Um, then you have starchier vegetables like sweet potato. And then, I mean, there's various other vegetables too, like onions and garlic. So try to get a variety is really key. Vegetables are really important and really good to load your plate on because they are naturally low in fat and calories, and they almost have no cholesterol as a whole, on the whole. So that's something you can eat a lot of and not worry about, getting too many calories or other kind of unhealthy nutrients. They're also important sources of nutrients that include potassium, dietary fiber, folate, vitamins A and C. And so these are all vitamins and minerals that you need to just have a natural functioning system and that we need a little bit of. So all vegetables kind of have varying degrees of your vitamins and nutrients. And so that's another reason to really diversify. And if you want more information at the end, we will have some discussion time. I would be happy to talk more about what each of these vitamins and minerals does generally for the body, but we'll save that kind of for the end if you're interested. Next, fruits. So again, fruits, just like vegetables, you can have a lot more of, you can really focus on. Ideally, you want to focus on whole fruits. So things that, don't really come in a can, or if they do come in a can, be mindful that there's no added sugar. But fresh whole fruit is important and the healthiest for you. They're naturally low in fat and sodium and pretty low in calories and have no cholesterol. Uh, the only thing that fruit can have a lot of is sugar. So just be mindful of that when you eat a lot of fruit. There is a good amount of sugar coming in. So just be mindful. And that's especially important for fruit juice. Fruit juice doesn't have any of the dietary fiber, and it's mostly sugar and vitamins, which are good, but just be mindful not to drink too much juice every day. Some of the vitamins and nutrients that you get from fruit: potassium, fiber, vitamin C, and folate. So some overlap, of course, with your vegetables. The only thing, the only added addition to be mindful of with your fruit is that, unlike vegetables, fruit does tend to have a good amount of sugar for the most part. So just be mindful of that. Next, grains are important. These include anything that comes from wheat, rice, oats, cornmeal, barley. So all your grains. And there's two kinds of grains that you want to be mindful of: whole grain and refined grains. So the whole grains are what you want to focus more on for a healthy diet. And ideally, you want to make half of the grains that you consume in a day whole grains. So these are like whole wheat flour, uh, oatmeal, brown rice. Um, what makes them whole is that they have a whole grain with them. That it's not they have both the germ and they have like the outside part as well. So they have more of a fibrous component to them. Whereas your refined grains like white flour, white bread, white rice, they've all been refined, and often the fiber part of it is removed. So there's less nutrients and it's less healthy for you. You can still have it; it's not absolutely unhealthy, but ideally make sure that you're getting both whole grains and refined grains, and focus on those whole grains. Now, there are a lot of nutrients in this group. These include, like I mentioned, fiber, particularly with the whole grains, but you also have several B vitamins, which include thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, and folate. And you also have several minerals. Iron, magnesium, and selenium are some of the major minerals. And having grains also helps with reducing your risk of heart disease and can help with weight management, particularly when you are focusing on those whole grains. So just keep that in mind. One of the reasons with refined grains you want to be careful, refined grains can often have excessive sugar in them. And so just want to be careful about that. And like I said, not as much fiber. Okay. And next are proteins. So proteins, of course, include meat, poultry, pork, beef, for example, eggs, seeds, nuts, soy products, beans, peas, and lentils. And I italicized the beans, peas, and lentils because, uh, as you may remember, those are also included in our vegetable group. So there is a little overlap with those ones. And if you're vegetarian, for instance, um, focusing on a diverse array of beans, peas, and lentils and nuts and seeds will really help get more protein into your diet, as well as soy products, of course, if you're vegetarian. Um, Varying your protein is really important. Really the key for all these food groups is variety. But when you vary your protein, one of the things you do want to include a lot of is, or have at least 8 ounces of per week, which is basically 2 daily servings of, is seafood. So fish, shellfish are really good because they have nutrients like iodine and good fatty good healthy fats as well that are included that you don't necessarily get in the other meats. Some of the nutrients in this group are protein, of course, your B vitamins, vitamin E, and then other minerals like iron, zinc, and magnesium. Now, one thing to be mindful of this group, that meats, particularly beef, pork, and lamb, can be high in saturated fat, which leads to a buildup of bad cholesterol. So just be mindful. Remember, saturated fat is one of those things we want to be minimizing in our diet. And the red meats in particular have a lot of this. So aiming for leaner cuts of those meats will make it a healthier, more nutritious food. Next, we have dairy. This includes milk, yogurt, cheese, and fortified soy milk or other milks that are fortified with nutrients. Um, nu- the nutrients in this group are calcium, phosphorus, vitamin A, vitamin D when it's fortified, riboflavin, vitamin B12, protein, potassium, zinc, magnesium, and selenium. So you have a lot in this group. Um, but you do want to, again, kind of like the meats, be focused on more of the low fat or fat free products to minimize your saturated fats, because as we know, pure cream and cheeses often can be pretty fatty. So just try ideally get more of the low fat type, but there's a lot of nutrients that you can get out of this. And if you are lactose intolerant or can't have dairy, um, there are a lot of really good soy products out there that are fortified and have the same or very similar nutrients. Okay. Finally, some of the dietary components just to be mindful of are your oils. So um, Oils, are not all bad, but you don't need a whole lot of them in your diet. These provide often your essential fatty acids. Some healthy oils are canola, corn, olive, peanut, safflower, soybean, avocado, and sunflower oils. Um, Ones that you want to avoid would be coconut oil, palm kernel oil, and palm oil, just because those actually have a lot of saturated fat. The other oils I've mentioned above are pretty low on your saturated fat, have more of the healthy fats. Coconut oil often has been popular in recent years as a healthy food, but really it's very high in saturated fat, so something you want to minimize if you can. Um, some beverages, always you want to focus ideally on calorie-free beverages or nutrient-rich beverages. So drink a lot of water. Water is the most important, the healthiest beverage to consume, um, or something nutritious. Milk, low-fat milk in particular, has a lot of nutrients. Of course, you don't want to only drink that, but but it is nutrient dense. 100% fruit juice also can be included in this. But again, just be mindful, there is often sugar in fruit juice. So just want to minimize any of beverages that aren't water. And finally, caffeine. It's okay to have caffeine, but ideally you want to keep it well under 400 milligrams per day. Generally, a cup of coffee is about 100 milligrams or a little over, maybe 150. It kind of depends on how strong you brew your coffee. But be mindful when you drink coffee or other caffeinated beverages, it is a diuretic. So that means it actually takes water kind of out of you. It makes you have to use the restroom more, right? And ideally, if you're going to drink a cup of coffee, match that with a cup of water to stay well hydrated. Okay. And as we've talked about, some of the foods to limit, excessive sugars. So for sugar, especially added sugar, you don't want more than 10% of your calories per day um, being that. Saturated fat should be less than 10% of your calories per day. Sodium less than 2,300 milligrams, which we'll talk about. Just give a little perspective, the average American has over 3,300 milligrams per day because salt is kind of in everything. But we do want to really be mindful of minimizing that. And of course, alcoholic beverages, ideally less than 2 drinks per day for men and less than 1 drink per day for women. Um, but if you don't drink, then just keep not drinking because alcohol in general has a lot of unhealthy effects. So minimize that when you can. Now, there was if you went on Kubigo, I did post a little a more in-depth overview of what's known as the healthy diet pattern for older adults or adults age 60 and above. And this is just kind of a basic overview. We won't break down each one, but you can see there's the calories. Often we say the average calorie per person is 2,000, but it could be less or more depending on your activity level and whether you're male or female. Female tend to use less calories per day, whereas males use more. That has to do a lot with muscle mass as well. And vegetables in general, you want to be getting over 2 cups of vegetables per day. Fruits, you want to be getting over 1.5 cups per day. Grains, around 6 ounces per day. Dairy, about 3 cups per day. Protein, a little over 5 ounces per day. And oils, around 25 grams per day for the average person. And there's more in depth. If you ever have questions on this and want to talk more about it, feel free to meet with me. I'd love to schedule an appointment with that. And obviously, a lot of this doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I think we all have an idea of maybe what a cup is. If you make a fist with your hand, it's probably a little more than a cup. So that's about how much you'd want. So like 1 cup of vegetables would be like a fist of diced vegetables, or 2 cups of leafy greens. So if you're eating a salad, you actually want a little bit more for it to be considered 1 serving of vegetables. Fruit, it could be 100% fruit juice, or like I said, like a cup or like a fist of fruit would be 1 serving of fruit. Grains, again, like a cup of cereal or a slice of bread, half of a cup of rice, or half of a cup of pasta is about 1 serving. Dairy, 1 cup or 1.5 ounces of cheese equals 1 serving of dairy. And your protein, 1 ounce of meat is basically one serving that they refer to. And then beans, it's only 1/4 of a cup, or 1 egg, 1 tablespoon of some type of nut butter like peanut butter, or 1/2 ounce of nuts equals like 1 serving of protein. Now, for those that are over the age of 60, there are some special considerations we want to keep in mind. Protein is really important in this age group because of a loss of muscle mass. As we get older, our muscles tend to atrophy more. And so you want to make sure there's ample protein in your system to make sure your body can keep maintaining the muscles. And this, of course, is in conjunction with physical activity. If you're not doing a whole lot, then that protein, unfortunately, probably won't go to very much use. But stay active and get enough protein is key. Hydration is also really important. It's been found that the average older adult has 2 cups fewer than all other age groups per day. And, in general, we want to be having at least 8 cups of water a day. And it's saying that most people in this population tend to be, 6 cups or less. And hydration, being well hydrated, is really important for our nervous system and for our brain. So just make sure that you're drinking water, even if you don't feel thirsty. If you do feel thirsty, as a general rule of thumb, that means you're already dehydrated. So make sure you're consistently drinking water. And again, if you need to use the restroom a lot, try to minimize caffeine so that you don't lose that water so quickly. Vitamin B12 is is a vitamin to really focus on for this group because a lot of medications and just age alone kind of affects your ability for the body to absorb B12. So you want to consume enough foods that have this. And as you may recall, this was mentioned earlier. Actually, I forget. Let me verify the food group here. Believe protein, but we can go over and look at the B12. But B12 is in a lot of vegetables and meats and dairy. So make sure you have that. And also with alcohol, you want to make sure you minimize use of this. This does, when you consume it in this age group, it does increase your risk of falls and accidents. It can actually have a negative interaction with medications and medical conditions. So try to limit alcohol. All right, and so that's where we are. And let me actually go back just to highlight, because I know we mentioned B12, and I actually didn't have it labeled here. So B12, yep. So your dairy products tend to have it. Proteins have a lot of B vitamins, not necessarily B12. And same with the grains. But your dairy products, where you're going to find a lot of those, your B12 vitamin. All right. So with that, if you have any questions, I just shared some food here that I enjoy, like kind of a different cultural backgrounds that still is very healthy, and you can see kind of the variety and the color of the plate. But if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself, and I would be happy to answer anything. And I can actually stop the share if anyone wants to talk here. Any questions or comments on nutrition? Protein in general, here, let me, so it varies. It's around 6 ounces. Yeah, that's what you would need.
Brett?
Oh, yeah.
My kidney doctor told me to drink 8 glasses of water a day. And when I did this, I ended up with low sodium.
Oh, interesting.
So he told me to cut down.
Yeah, so it does vary, I would say, on body type too. So, I mean, and or an activity level. If you're very active or not very active, if you're very active, you're going to need to drink more. If you're not very active, less active, then less, but there are a number of factors. Sometimes we retain more water as well. So that does vary. 8 is kind of the general, a
Right.
guideline, but it's just something to be mindful of. Of course, if a doctor is saying, yeah, you're low in sodium, then um, follow their advice. Yeah. Just for the general population here, it's people tend to be drinking less, is what's been found in studies. I am curious, do you generally minimize your sodium intake on salt as well, Barbara? Or?
Years ago, the doctor told me to put Chuck on a low sodium diet.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I put the whole family.
Oh, good. Yeah. Well,
They
that's
didn't.
good. Well, you're very much not the average, because most Americans, are way above their sodium levels and are not drinking enough. So that's
Yeah, the kids didn't appreciate it.
yeah, yeah. But a lot of foods like protein and your grain groups tend to have sodium already in them as well. So I mean, you rarely have to add additional
Yeah.
salt and such. I mean, a little, for taste, but just being mindful of that number. I'm now always looking at nutrition information, because soups, for instance, like if you have a cup of noodle soup, that's like over oftentimes like 1,300 milligrams of sodium in your average cup of noodle soup. That's more than half of what you are recommended to have in a day. So little mindful things like that are important.
Brett, how healthy is a potato without the sour cream and butter?
So potato, I mean, it's in that starchy vegetable group. It depends,
Right.
if you're just talking about like a russet potato, basically.
Baked potato,
Yeah,
right.
baked potato. Yeah, I mean, if it's baked, right, and not saturated in a lot of butter and other stuff, it's healthy. It's not it does have, carbohydrates, simple carbohydrates, which
Yeah.
there's been a lot of recent talk about, minimizing your carbs, but really, for a well-rounded diet, unless you're focused on just, super weight loss, you do need carbs, and potatoes aren't they have potassium and other things too.
Yeah, it has potassium. This is what I was, and not too many foods you get your potassium.
Yeah, potassium is in a lot of like small, various things. Often we think of bananas, but a lot of vegetables do have potassium in varying levels. But starchier ones like potatoes and sweet potatoes have higher levels of potassium. You are right.
Yeah, I'm comparing this with potatoes and rice as your starch for the meal.
Yeah, I would say if it's white rice versus potatoes, potatoes are going to be probably a little healthier, a little more nutritious. Brown rice has more fiber.
Oh yeah.
So it tends to be.
Yeah. Just curious. Thank you.
Yeah. Any comments?
We enjoy eating the potato skin, and that supposedly is more healthy than the potato itself.
Yeah. I've never researched or validated, that's what I always heard too. I assume that's probably true. But yeah, I mean, the potato skins are good. Well, I think the one thing, depending on how you eat it, is just, if they're fried, for instance, or, just be mindful of the cooking method with them.
But then I like to put butter or sour cream on it, so that gives you fat.
Yeah, and butter and sour cream, while they are dairy products, they're not actually included as one of the nutrient-dense dairy products. So unfortunately, it's one of those things. It's kind of like one of the foods to limit, right? Because it does tend to have more saturated fat.
Speaking of butter, that seems to go off and on as to its benefits, like comparing it to margarine. So right now, butter's not so good, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah, according to the recent guidelines, the most recent, and I've been reviewing the 2020 to 2025 guidelines for Americans. It's still something that you want to minimize. Saturated fat is still something. While I know there's been a lot of talk about it, maybe it's not as bad. It's still something you want to minimize. Doesn't mean you have to cut it out completely. It just means, like I said, keep it less than 10% of your daily diet, right?
That shouldn't be too hard.
Yeah, I forget, and looking at nutrition, the little nutrition notes on on butter will tell you how much, like in a serving size. I don't have, unfortunately, that right off the get-go, but it also, now they've been showing the percentage of your daily diet. So it is helpful.
And then salad dressing, that's another thing to watch
Yeah.
out for, right?
Yeah, so for dressing, it depends on what kind of dressing. If it's like a buttermilk ranch dressing, that's going to have more saturated fat and be a little less healthy. Your like Italian dressings or balsamic vinegar, your vinaigrettes and such are actually pretty healthy. Actually, I mean, doesn't mean go crazy on them, but they do have more of the healthy, what they're called monosaturated fats. So I've actually personally, I make I make all my dressings
Yeah.
now because it's pretty easy. Just olive oil and
Lemon
some
juice.
kind of
Yeah.
vinegar and or citrus juice, and you can actually make it a pretty healthy healthy way to flavor your food.
You mentioned 8 ounces of either seafood and meat per week. Now,
So
that's
it's actually 8 ounces of seafood. So you want to ideally include 8 ounces of seafood per day. I think it's around on average 6 ounces per day. So per week, you're gonna have more than that. You'll have 42 ounces per week, right? But of those 42, 8 ounces ideally should be in that seafood category.
Oh, yeah.
And largely focused on like fish like salmon and tuna, some of the larger fish, because they tend to have there's fish oil and other important fatty acids that you don't really get as much high quantities of. Those omega-3
right.
fatty acids. Any
Very
other comments? We do have about a little over 5 minutes here, so. And I'm working after this. I'm going to be working on actually posting these presentations on a YouTube channel. So if you ever want to come back to this and watch it again, feel free. That will be posted. I'll let everyone know when it is online. Did anyone want to know about any of the vitamins, anything? So I know we kind of just labeled, what is in each group, but we didn't really talk about those vitamins. So your B vitamins in general, which there's a lot of. B vitamins cover, often are named like thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, folate, and B12. Those are all really important for our nervous system and how the brain and nervous system takes care of itself. So we want to make sure that you get enough of those, and they're found kind of all throughout your grains, your dairy, proteins, all have them. And then of course the vitamin A, C, K are all often found in your vegetables and fruits.
Okay.
And minerals are found kind of in your fruits and grains and vegetables as well.
What is this folate? Folate?
Yeah, folate, often known as folic acid. Folic acid is just man-made. It's it's important for your body's means of producing, forming red blood cells. It's really important. There's often a lot of talk about it because for people that are pregnant, but because in terms of development, but for the average person, what we focus on would be like the red blood cell development. It is still very important. Can have a lot to do with like just healthy blood cells. And it is because it was so important. There were, in fact, I actually was, my mom, I guess, was low in folate. I was born with spina bifida, which is one of those conditions that is affected, that can happen if the woman doesn't have enough folate in their diet. And it's found less common these days. It's fortified in a lot of like breads and your grains to make sure that people get enough of it. Yeah. And let's see. And of course, yeah, I'm sure we all know, calcium is super important for our bones, and that's something that's important as we get older too, because our bone density does decrease as we get older. And vitamin D in relation to that is really important. Vitamin D is often in fortified foods, like milk is often fortified with vitamin D. But as we probably all know, you can get the most vitamin D. The best way to get it is probably just being out in the sun. So especially in the spring and summer, get at
Right.
least 30 minutes a day of sunlight and you'll get your vitamin D.
30 minutes a day. Wow.
Around, 30 minutes. Now still wear sunscreen. Doesn't mean just 30
Oh,
minutes.
yeah.
No, sunscreen is still important. You'll still absorb 30 minutes, and ideally don't wear a jacket or something. You do want the skin to be exposed to get that full dose. All right. Any other comments, feedback, questions? Who here, does anyone here cook some of their own food?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Off and on, yeah. Yeah, I'm
We
a
get
big,
enough here. We
what was
get
that?
enough food. Oh, we get enough food here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
More than
yeah. Yeah, I really love cooking. It's one of
Oh,
my
good.
ways
Yeah,
to relax
it's fun.
and trying different cultural cuisines. I lately been really into Thai cooking. So.
Okay, what about sesame seed oil?
Sesame seed oil is fine. It's kind of
Okay, it's a
like
nut.
peanut oil. It's generally not
Yeah.
unhealthy, in adequate in smallish amounts.
A little bit of that in your salad dressing adds a lot.
Yeah. Sesame oil definitely talks a lot when you use it in any kind of cooking. You don't need a whole lot of it.
Right.
When I make scrambled eggs or something, I put just a little,
Yeah.
a couple of drops, and that will really
Very
bring up
good.
some of those savory flavors. Well, very good. Well, if you ever want to talk more about nutrition or anything, fitness and health related, I'd love to meet with you. I did post on Kubigo the kind of a more thorough, in-depth overview of guidelines for people 60 and above. So we could always talk about that if you have more questions. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next week. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you. All
Thanks so
right,
much.
Brett. Thank you.
There we go. Take care, everyone.